Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed through the heavy glass doors of the downtown office building. His 5-year-old daughter Emma clutched his hand tightly, her small fingers sticky from the ice cream they had shared at the park. The building's air conditioning hit them like a wave of relief after the scorching summer heat outside. "Daddy, I really need to go potty," Emma whispered, tugging at his worn jeans. Marcus looked around the fancy lobby with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Everything screamed expensive, and he felt out of place in his construction boots and faded t-shirt. He had only come here to drop off some building permits for his small contracting business, but Emma's urgent need took priority. The security guard behind the polished desk barely looked up as Marcus approached. "Excuse me, where's the restroom?" Marcus asked politely. The guard pointed toward a hallway without lifting his eyes from his newspaper. Marcus thanked him and hurried Emma down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the quiet space. They found the restroom tucked away near the elevators. Marcus hesitated for a moment, looking at the pristine white tiles and gleaming fixtures. This was clearly a high-end building, probably housing some of the city's most important businesses. He helped Emma into one of the stalls, standing guard outside while she took care of her business. As Emma finished up, Marcus heard the restroom door open behind him. Heavy footsteps approached, and he glanced over his shoulder to see a tall man in an expensive navy suit. The stranger's shoes alone probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. The man had silver hair perfectly styled, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that came with power and money. Emma emerged from the stall, and Marcus helped her wash her hands at the sink. The well-dressed man moved to the sink next, to them, and Marcus couldn't help but notice his solid gold watch and diamond cufflinks. The contrast between them was striking. Marcus with his calloused hands and work clothes, and this polished businessman who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. "Cute kid," the man said suddenly, smiling at Emma as she dried her hands with a paper towel. His voice was warm, not at all what Marcus had expected from someone who looked so intimidating. Emma beamed back at him, completely unaware of any social differences. "Thank you," Marcus replied, feeling slightly more at ease. "She's my whole world." The man's expression softened even more. "I can tell. The way she looks at you, that's pure trust and love right there. Not everyone gets to experience that." There was something wistful in his tone, as if he spoke from personal experience about what he was missing. Emma, being 5 years old and completely fearless, decided to join the conversation. "My daddy builds houses, really big ones with lots of rooms. What do you do?" she asked the stranger with the innocent curiosity that only children possess. The man chuckled, kneeling down to Emma's level. "I work with numbers and papers, nothing." "As exciting as building houses. That sounds like a very important job your daddy has." Marcus felt a warm feeling in his chest. It wasn't often that people, especially wealthy-looking people, showed genuine interest in his work. Most of the time, he felt invisible or looked down upon when he entered buildings like this one. But this man seemed different, treating both him and Emma with respect and kindness. "We should probably get going," Marcus said, glancing at his watch. He still had those permits to deliver, and he didn't want to take up any more of this obviously important man's time. "Come on, Emma." As they headed toward the door, the man called out, "Take care of that little angel. She's lucky to have a dad who clearly loves her so much." Marcus turned back with a genuine smile. "Thanks, I really appreciate that. Have a good day, sir." The man nodded, and Marcus noticed he seemed to watch them leave with an expression that was hard to read. Part admiration, part longing, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. Outside in the hallway, Emma skipped alongside her father, completely energized by the brief encounter. "Daddy, that man was really nice. He had sparkly things on his shirt." Marcus laughed, ruffling her hair. "Those were cufflinks, sweetheart. And yes, he was very nice." As they waited for the elevator, Marcus found himself thinking about the stranger. There had been something genuine about him, something that went beyond his expensive clothes and polished appearance. The way he had spoken about Emma, and about the trust between a father and child, suggested he understood the value of family. in a way that perhaps he hadn't experienced himself. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and as the doors closed behind them, Marcus had no idea that he had just met one of the most powerful and sought-after men in the entire city. He was just grateful for a kind encounter in an otherwise intimidating place, and for the reminder that sometimes, unexpected moments of human connection could happen anywhere, even in a downtown office building restroom. Little did Marcus know that this brief meeting would change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The well-dressed man remained in the restroom for several minutes after Marcus and Emma left, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His name was Alexander Reed, though very few people called him anything other than Mr. Reed or Sir. At 52 years old, he was the CEO of Reed Industries, one of the largest construction and development companies on the East Coast. His company's headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of this very building. Alexander splashed cold water on his face, trying to shake off the unexpected emotion that had stirred within him during the brief encounter. The little girl's innocent questions and bright smile had touched something deep inside him that he thought he had buried years ago. The way her father looked at her, protected her, and clearly adored her. It was everything Alexander had once dreamed of having but had sacrificed for his career. 20 years ago, Alexander had been engaged to a wonderful woman named Sarah. They had planned a life together, talked about children, about building something meaningful beyond just business success. But as his company grew and the demands increased, he had chosen work over love, meetings over family dinners, and profits over personal relationships. Sarah had tried to be patient, but eventually she couldn't compete with his obsession with success. "You'll regret this one day," she had told him the night she left, tears streaming down her face. "Money and power won't hold you when you're old and alone, Alex. But you won't listen until it's too late." She had been right, of course. Now, at the height of his success, Alexander was indeed alone. His penthouse apartment was filled with expensive art and furniture, but empty of laughter and love. He had never married, never had children, and had pushed away everyone who had tried to get close to him over the years. Alexander straightened his tie and walked toward the elevator bank, but he couldn't stop thinking about the contractor and his daughter. The man had been wearing work clothes that had seen better days. His hands were rough from manual labor, and he had looked slightly intimidated by the fancy building. Yet there had been a richness in his life that Alexander envied, the unconditional love of his child, and the simple joy of being her hero. As the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, Alexander's assistant Jennifer was waiting for him with a stack of papers and a concerned expression. "Mr. Reed, you have the board meeting in 10 minutes, and the Henderson project needs your approval by end of day. Also, there are 17 messages from reporters asking about the merger, rumors." Alexander took the papers without really seeing them. "Jennifer, do me a favor. Find out who handles the building permits for our current downtown projects. I want to know which contractors we're working with." Jennifer looked puzzled, but made a note. "Of course, sir. Is there a problem with one of the permits?" "No problem," Alexander said, walking toward his corner office. "Just curiosity." The board meeting dragged on for 2 hours, but Alexander found it hard to focus. His mind kept wandering back to the restroom encounter. He kept seeing Emma's bright eyes and hearing her father's gentle voice as he spoke to her. There had been something so authentic about their relationship, so different from the calculated interactions that filled Alexander's daily life. During a break in the meeting, Alexander stepped onto his private balcony overlooking the city. Somewhere down there, that little girl was probably having dinner with her father, maybe telling him about her day, maybe asking him to read her a bedtime story. Alexander tried to remember the last time he had had a genuine conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell him something or get something from him. His phone buzzed with another urgent message, but for once, Alexander ignored it. Instead, he found himself wondering about the contractor's story. Was he a single father by choice or circumstance? How did he manage to balance running a business with raising a child? What kind of houses did he build, and did he love his work, the way Alexander had once loved his before it became just about numbers and profit margins? Later that evening, Alexander sat in his empty penthouse eating takeout sushi while reviewing quarterly reports. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic far below. He thought about calling one of his few remaining friends, but realized he wasn't sure if he actually had any real friends left. Just business associates and networking contacts. His laptop chimed with an email from Jennifer containing the information he had requested about building permits and contractors. Alexander scrolled through the list, looking for something that might connect to the man he had met that day. There were dozens of small contracting companies working on various Reed Industries projects throughout the city. One name caught his attention: Sullivan Construction. The owner was listed as Marcus Sullivan, and according to the records, he had submitted permits that very day for a small residential project. Alexander stared at the name on his screen, wondering if this could be the same man. The timing was certainly right, and Sullivan Construction was small enough that the owner would likely handle permit submissions personally. Alexander found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He looked up the company's website. It was simple and straightforward, featuring photos of modest homes and small commercial buildings. The About Us section contained a brief paragraph about Marcus Sullivan's commitment to quality workmanship and fair pricing for hardworking families. There was a photo of Marcus in a hard hat, smiling beside a newly completed house. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, Alexander saved the website to his bookmarks. He told himself it was just professional curiosity, but deep down, he knew it was something more. That brief encounter in the restroom had awakened something in him that he thought was gone forever, a longing for genuine human connection and the simple, honest life he had once imagined for himself. As he prepared for bed in his luxury master suite, Alexander made a decision that would have shocked anyone who knew him. Tomorrow, he was going to find a way to cross paths with Marcus Sullivan again. Marcus woke up at 5:30 the next morning to the sound of his alarm clock, the same way he had every workday for the past 3 years. Emma was still sleeping peacefully in her small bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings she had made at school. He moved quietly around their modest 2-bedroom apartment, making coffee and packing his lunch for another long day on the construction site. Their apartment wasn't much to look at: worn carpet, outdated kitchen appliances, and walls that could use a fresh coat of paint. But it was home. Marcus had been saving every penny he could to move Emma to a better neighborhood with better schools. But progress was slow. Every month seemed to bring new expenses, from Emma's daycare costs to repairs on his aging work truck. As he buttoned his work shirt, Marcus found himself thinking again about the man from yesterday. There had been something different about him, something that went beyond his expensive clothes. The way he had spoken about Emma, with such genuine warmth and understanding, had stayed with Marcus throughout the evening. Most wealthy people he encountered either ignored him completely or treated him like he was invisible. Emma shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Morning, Daddy," she mumbled, climbing onto her chair at their small kitchen table. "Morning, Princess," Marcus said, pouring her a glass of orange juice and setting out her cereal. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded, then suddenly perked up. "Daddy, remember the nice man we met yesterday? The one with the sparkly shirt buttons?" Marcus smiled, spreading peanut butter on Emma's toast. "I remember him." "What made you think of him?" "I dreamed about him," Emma said matter-of-factly, as only children can. "He was sad in my dream. Really, really sad, like when I cried when Mommy went to heaven." Marcus paused, the butter knife halfway across the toast. Emma rarely mentioned her mother anymore, though she had been too young when cancer took Lisa to really understand what had happened. But children had a way of seeing things adults missed, and Emma's comment about the stranger being sad struck Marcus as surprisingly perceptive. After dropping Emma at daycare, Marcus drove to his current job site, a small office building renovation across town. His crew was already there, unloading materials and setting up for another day of work. Marcus had built Sullivan Construction from nothing after Lisa's death, determined to create a stable life for Emma while doing work that mattered. He took pride in every project, no matter how small. Around 10 o'clock, as Marcus was reviewing blueprints with his foreman Tony, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the construction site. Marcus glanced up, wondering if it was a building inspector or perhaps someone from the client's office. He watched as a tall figure in a business suit stepped out of the back seat. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee cup when he recognized the man from yesterday's restroom encounter. The stranger looked just as polished and expensive as before, but there was something different in his posture, less confidence, more uncertainty. He stood by his car for a moment, as if debating whether to approach. "You know that guy, boss?" Tony asked, following Marcus's gaze. "Sort of," Marcus replied, setting down his blueprints. "I'll be right back." Marcus walked across the dusty lot, his work boots crunching on gravel. As he got closer, he could see that the well-dressed man looked nervous, which seemed odd for someone who clearly had money and power. When their eyes met, the man's face broke into a hesitant smile. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," the man said, extending his hand. "Alexander Reed. We met yesterday at the downtown office building." "Marcus Sullivan," Marcus replied, shaking the offered hand. "And yes, I remember. You were very kind to my daughter. What brings you to this neck of the woods?" Alexander looked around at the construction site, taking in the organized chaos of workers and equipment. "Actually, I was looking for you. I hope that doesn't sound strange. I got your information from the building permit records. I hope you don't mind." Marcus felt a flutter of concern. Had he done something wrong with the permits? Was this man some kind of government official? "Is there a problem with my paperwork?" "No, nothing like that," Alexander said quickly, seeing Marcus's worried expression. "I'll be completely honest with you, which is something I don't do very often anymore. Yesterday, meeting you and your daughter, it affected me more than I expected. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Marcus studied Alexander's face, trying to read his intentions. The man seemed sincere, but Marcus had learned to be cautious, especially when it came to protecting Emma. "I'm not sure I understand." Alexander ran a hand through his silver hair, looking more human and vulnerable than his expensive suit suggested. "I'm not explaining this well. The truth is, I've spent the last 20 years building a very successful business, but somewhere along the way I lost sight of what really matters. Seeing you with your daughter yesterday reminded me of things I gave up, choices I made that I'm not proud of." "What kind of business are you in?" Marcus asked. "Construction and development, Reed Industries. Maybe you've heard of us?" Marcus's eyes widened. Reed Industries was one of the biggest companies in the state, responsible for half the major building projects in the city. He had heard rumors that the CEO was some kind of mystery man, rarely seen in public, intensely private. The idea that this was the same person who had complimented Emma in a restroom was almost impossible to believe. "You're Alexander Reed?" "The Alexander Reed?" Marcus asked. Alexander nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with the recognition. "I know this is unusual. I don't normally do anything like this, but I was wondering if you might be interested in getting a coffee sometime. Maybe bring Emma if she'd like. I'd like to talk with you more." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected turn of events. Here was one of the most powerful men in the city, someone whose company had probably built half the buildings Marcus saw every day, asking him to have coffee. It seemed surreal. "Can I ask why?" Marcus said finally. "I mean, we don't exactly travel in the same circles." Alexander's expression became even more vulnerable. "Because yesterday, for about 5 minutes, I remembered what it felt like to have a normal human conversation. And because your daughter saw something in me that I thought was completely gone. She saw someone worth smiling at, and I can't remember the last time someone looked at me that way without wanting something in return." Marcus looked back at his crew who were watching this conversation with obvious curiosity, then back at Alexander. There was something genuine in the man's eyes, something that reminded Marcus of his own loneliness since Lisa's death. Maybe they both needed a friend more than either of them realized. "All right, Mr. Reed," Marcus said. "Coffee sounds good." 3 days later, Marcus found himself sitting in a quiet coffee shop downtown. Emma coloring in a book beside him while they waited for Alexander to arrive. He had chosen a small, family-owned cafe rather than one of the upscale places he assumed Alexander would prefer. If they were going to do this, Marcus wanted it to be on neutral ground where Emma would feel comfortable. Emma had been excited about seeing the nice man with sparkly buttons again, though she couldn't understand why. Her father seemed nervous about it. Marcus had spent the past 3 days wondering if he was making a mistake. What could he and Alexander Reed possibly have in common? What did a billionaire CEO want with a small-time contractor and his 5-year-old daughter? The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see Alexander entering. But this wasn't the perfectly polished businessman from their previous encounters. Alexander wore dark jeans, a simple white button-down shirt, and casual leather shoes. He looked around the cozy cafe with its mismatched chairs and local artwork on the walls, and Marcus could see him genuinely taking it in rather than judging. "It, Mr. Reed?" Marcus stood up, extending his hand. "Please call me Alex," Alexander said, shaking Marcus's hand warmly. "Mr. Reed makes me feel like my father, and trust me, that's not a good thing." Emma looked up from her coloring book and beamed. "You came. Daddy said you might be too busy with important work stuff." Alexander knelt down to Emma's eye level, just as he had in the restroom. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." "What are you, drawing there?" "It's a house," Emma said proudly, holding up her book. "See? It has lots of windows so the sunshine can come in, and a big yard for a dog. Daddy says maybe someday we can get a dog when we have a bigger place." Alexander studied the colorful drawing with genuine interest. "That's beautiful, Emma. I especially like how you made all the windows different colors. It makes the house look happy." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He had promised Emma they might get a dog someday, but the truth was their tiny apartment didn't allow pets, and he wasn't sure when they'd be able to afford anything bigger. It was one of many small disappointments he carried as a single father, doing his best on a limited budget. They ordered their drinks, coffee for the men, hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Emma, and settled into comfortable conversation. Alexander asked Emma about school, her friends, and her favorite games, listening to her answers with the kind of attention most adults didn't give children. He seemed genuinely fascinated by her 5-year-old perspective on the world. "What's your favorite thing about your daddy's job?" Alexander asked Emma. Emma thought seriously about this question, tapping her finger against her lips the way she always did when concentrating. "He builds safe places for people to live, and sometimes he lets me wear his hard hat when we visit the sites on weekends. It's really big on me, but it makes me feel important." Alexander glanced at Marcus with something that looked like admiration. "That does sound very important. Building homes for people is one of the most valuable things anyone can do." As Emma returned to her coloring, the two men talked more quietly. Marcus found himself surprised by how easy it was to talk to Alexander. Despite the enormous difference in their circumstances, Alexander asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's work, his challenges as a single father, and his hopes for Emma's future. There was none of the condescension Marcus had expected from someone so wealthy and powerful. "Can I ask what happened to Emma's mother?" Alexander said gently. "You don't have to answer if it's too personal." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Emma carefully color inside the lines of her drawing. "Cancer," he said finally. 3 years ago. Lisa was diagnosed when Emma was 2, and she fought for a whole year. She was everything good in the world." "I'm sorry," Alexander said, and Marcus could hear that he truly meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. "The hardest part wasn't losing her, as terrible as that sounds," Marcus continued. "The hardest part was watching Emma not understand why Mommy couldn't play with her anymore, why she was always tired, why she had to stay in the hospital. Emma still asks about her sometimes, and I never know what to say." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, you seem to be doing an amazing job. Emma is clearly happy and secure and loved. That's more than a lot of children have, even those with 2 parents." "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Ever been married? Kids?" Alexander's expression grew distant. No to both. I was engaged once, a long time ago. Sarah was wonderful, smart, funny, kind. She would have been a great mother, but I chose work over her, told myself I was building something important. By the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. It's never too late, Marcus said. You're still young enough to start a family. Alexander shook his head with a sad smile. I'm 52, Marcus. Set in my ways, probably too selfish at this point to put someone else's needs first. And honestly, after spending 20 years caring only about profit margins and stock prices, I'm not sure I'd even know how to be a good father or husband. Emma looked up from her coloring book, apparently having heard part of their conversation, despite appearing absorbed in her artwork. With the straightforward honesty that only children possess, she said, "You seem nice to me. I bet you'd be a good daddy if you practiced." Both men were quiet for a moment, struck by the simple wisdom in her words. Alexander's eyes looked suspiciously bright, and he cleared his throat before speaking. You know what, Emma? You might be. Right about that. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Alexander hesitated before saying goodbye. Marcus, I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but I've been thinking about something. My company has several residential projects starting up, and we're always looking for reliable subcontractors. Would you be interested in bidding on some work? Marcus felt a mix of excitement and caution. I appreciate the offer, but I don't want charity. If you're offering this because you feel sorry for us, I'm not, Alexander said firmly. I've done my research since meeting you. Sullivan Construction has an excellent reputation for quality work and fair pricing. I'm offering because I think you'd do good work for us and because good contractors are hard to find. But I understand if you'd prefer to keep our friendship separate from business. Marcus considered this. More work would mean more income, which could mean a better apartment, maybe even that dog Emma wanted. But it would also mean being connected, professionally to Alexander, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that level of complication in their unexpected friendship. Can I think about it? Marcus asked. Of course, Alexander said. No pressure either way. As they walked to their cars, Emma skipping between them, Marcus found himself hoping this wouldn't be their last coffee together. Despite everything that should have made them different, he had enjoyed Alexander's company. There was something real about the man beneath all that success and polish, something lonely and searching that Marcus recognized because he felt it too. Maybe they both needed this friendship more than they realized. Over the next several weeks, Marcus and Alexander began meeting regularly for coffee, sometimes with Emma and sometimes just the two of them. What had started as an unlikely encounter was developing into a genuine friendship that surprised them, both. Alexander found himself looking forward to these meetings in a way he hadn't anticipated anything in years. While Marcus discovered that beneath Alexander's wealthy exterior was someone who genuinely cared about others and was desperately lonely, Marcus had decided to accept some of the subcontracting work Alexander had offered, but he had been careful to maintain his standards and independence. The projects were legitimate, the pay was fair, and Alexander never made him feel like he owed him anything beyond good workmanship. In fact, Alexander seemed to go out of his way to ensure their business relationship didn't interfere with their growing friendship. One Saturday afternoon, Alexander surprised them both by showing up at Marcus's current job site wearing jeans and work boots, asking if he could watch the crew in action. Emma was there too, as she often was on weekends, wearing her tiny hard hat and helping by carrying small tools to the workers. I realized I haven't actually been on a construction site in probably 15 years, Alexander admitted as he watched Marcus's crew frame out a new wall. I spend all my time in boardrooms talking about projects, but I'd forgotten what the actual building looks like. Marcus handed Alexander a spare hard hat. Want to try swinging a hammer? Fair warning, though, it's harder than it looks. For the next hour, Alexander attempted to help with basic tasks under Marcus's patient guidance. He was terrible at it, missing nails and getting splinters, but he laughed more than Marcus had ever seen him laugh. Emma appointed herself Alexander's supervisor, seriously instructing him on proper hammer technique and praising his efforts even when they were clearly disasters. You're getting better, Emma announced after Alexander successfully drove a nail all the way in on only his fourth try. "Daddy, doesn't Alex hit the nail good now?" Marcus grinned, watching Alexander beam with pride over Emma's approval. "He's definitely improving. Maybe we'll make a real contractor out of him yet." During their lunch break, sitting on stacks of lumber and sharing sandwiches from Marcus's cooler, Alexander grew more thoughtful. "I used to love this part," he said, looking around at the half-built structure. "When I first started the company, I was hands-on with everything. I knew every worker's name, every project detail. Somewhere along the way, I got so focused on growing the business that I forgot why I loved it in the first place." "It's not too late to get back to that," Marcus said. "You're the boss. You can run your company however you want." Alexander nodded slowly. "You know, you're right. I've been thinking about making some changes. Maybe spending more time on actual projects instead of just financial reports. Maybe remembering that we're not just building structures, we're creating homes and communities." Emma, who had been quietly eating her peanut butter sandwich, suddenly looked up. "Alex, do you live in a big house?" "I live in a big apartment," Alexander answered, "at the very top of a tall building downtown." "Is it lonely up there?" she asked with the direct honesty that continually amazed both men. Alexander paused, clearly struck by the question. "Sometimes it is, Emma. It's very quiet." "You should get a dog," Emma declared. "Dogs make everything less lonely. That's what Daddy says anyway." Marcus felt his cheeks warm slightly. He had indeed said that during one of their conversations, about why they couldn't have pets in their current apartment. But hearing Emma repeat it to Alexander made him realize how much his own loneliness showed sometimes, despite his efforts to stay strong for her. "Maybe I should," Alexander agreed seriously. "What kind of dog do you think I should get?" Emma launched into a detailed discussion of various dog breeds and their merits, clearly having given this topic considerable thought. As she talked, Marcus noticed how Alexander listened to every word, treating her opinions with the same respect he would give to any business advisor. Later, as they cleaned up the job site, Alexander pulled Marcus aside. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure," Marcus replied, though he felt a familiar flutter of nervousness. Their friendship had grown deeper over the weeks, but he was still sometimes surprised by Alexander's interest in his life. "Do you ever think about dating again? I mean, Emma's still young, and you're young. Don't you want someone to share your life with?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Emma play with some wood scraps, building an elaborate city for her imaginary characters. "Honestly, I'm scared. She was perfect for me. We were high school sweethearts, grew up together. The idea of trusting someone new with Emma's heart, with my heart, it terrifies me. What if I choose wrong? What if someone hurts her?" Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that fear, but isn't there also a risk in not trying? Emma could benefit from having a mother figure, and you deserve to be happy." "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Ever think about trying again?" Alexander's expression grew distant. "I think about it more lately, especially since meeting you and Emma, but I'm not sure I'd know how to be in a real relationship anymore. I've spent so many years being selfish, putting work first, and at my age, most women would probably be more interested in my money than in me." "You might be surprised," Marcus said. "You're a good man, Alex. You're kind, you're thoughtful, and you genuinely care about people. That matters more than money to the right person." As they prepared to leave, Emma ran up to Alexander with something clutched in her small hands. "I made this for you," she said, presenting him with a small wooden heart she had carved from a scrap piece with Marcus's help. It was rough and imperfect, clearly the work of a 5-year-old, but it had been painted bright red with careful attention. "For me?" Alexander asked, kneeling down to accept the gift. His voice was suspiciously thick. "So your big apartment won't be so lonely," Emma explained. "You can put it somewhere you'll see it and remember that me and Daddy are your friends." Alexander stared down at the little wooden heart, and Marcus saw his eyes fill with tears that he quickly blinked away. "Thank you, Emma. This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me." As Marcus watched Alexander carefully tuck the wooden heart into his shirt pocket, close to his own heart, He realized something had fundamentally changed in their friendship. They were no longer just two lonely men who had happened to meet. They were becoming something like family. And for the first time since Lisa's death, Marcus began to believe that maybe they could all find their way to something better together. The thought both thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. 6 months after their first meeting in the office building restroom, Marcus's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. Alexander had become not just a friend, but almost like family, and their unlikely bond had brought unexpected opportunities and joy to both their lives. Emma adored Uncle Alex, as she had started calling him, and Alexander had embraced this role with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including himself. The biggest change came when Alexander made Marcus an offer that initially left him speechless. Reed Industries was launching a new division focused on affordable housing development, and Alexander wanted Marcus to head up the construction side as a full partner, not just a subcontractor. It would mean a steady income, benefits for Emma, and the chance to build homes for families who needed them most. "I don't understand," Marcus had said when Alexander first proposed the idea over dinner at a small Italian restaurant they had both come to love. "Why would you want me as a partner? I'm just a small contractor." Alexander had smiled, reaching across the table to ruffle Emma's hair as she concentrated on her spaghetti. "Because you understand something I forgot along the way. You remember that we're not just building structures, we're building dreams, futures, safe places for families to grow. And because I trust you completely." The decision hadn't been easy for Marcus. Accepting the partnership would mean giving up the independence of running his own small company, but it would also provide security for Emma that he could never achieve on his own. After many sleepless nights and long conversations with Alexander, he had finally accepted. Now, as Marcus stood in the office of their new affordable housing division, watching Alexander review plans for their first major project, he still sometimes couldn't believe how dramatically his life had changed. The office wasn't fancy. Alexander had insisted they keep overhead low so more money could go into the actual construction, but it felt right. Pictures of completed homes lined the walls, along with thank you letters from families who had been able to buy their first houses through their previous smaller projects. "The Johnson family moves into Unit 12 next week," Alexander said, looking up from the blueprints. "Mrs. Johnson called yesterday to thank us again. Apparently, their 8-year-old daughter has been planning how to decorate her room for months." Marcus smiled, remembering his own excitement when he and Lisa had bought their first tiny apartment. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Giving kids a place to dream. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma bursting through the office door, still wearing her school backpack and clutching a paper in her hand. She had been taking the bus to their office after school for the past month, and both men had adjusted their schedules to make sure one of them was always there when she arrived. "Daddy, Uncle Alex, look what I got," she announced, waving the paper excitedly. Marcus took the paper and saw it was a drawing Emma had made at school, accompanied by a short essay titled, "My Family." In the picture, 3 figures stood in front of a house. A tall man with dark hair labeled Daddy, a smaller figure with pigtails labeled Me, and another tall man with silver hair labeled Uncle Alex. All 3 figures were holding hands and smiling. "We had to write about our families," Emma explained as both men read her essay. "I wrote about how my daddy builds houses, and how Uncle Alex helps him, and how we're all a team. Mrs. Peterson said it was really good." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he read Emma's words describing how Uncle Alex had made their family bigger and happier, how he helped with homework and came to her school programs, and how he made Daddy smile more than he used to. It was all true, but seeing it written in Emma's careful handwriting made the depth of their bond suddenly very real. Alexander cleared his throat and turned away slightly, pretending to study the blueprints again. But Marcus could see he was deeply moved. Over the months, Alexander had gradually become more involved in Emma's daily life, helping with school projects, attending parent-teacher conferences alongside Marcus, and even learning to braid her hair when she decided she wanted to look fancy for picture day. "This is beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said, pulling Emma into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "Can we put it on the wall with the other pictures?" Emma asked, looking between her father and Alexander. "Absolutely," Alexander said, his voice still slightly rough with emotion, right in the center where everyone can see it. As Alexander carefully pinned Emma's drawing to the wall, Marcus realized that somewhere along the way, they had indeed become a real family. Not in the traditional sense, but in all the ways that mattered. They supported each other, celebrated each other's successes, and faced challenges together. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Alexander answered with his usual professional tone, but Marcus could hear his voice soften as he spoke. Yes. Sarah, I understand. Of course, I'd love to meet for coffee. No, actually, I'd like you to meet some people who are very important to me. Marcus raised an eyebrow as Alexander hung up. He had heard that name before. Sarah was the woman Alexander had been engaged to years ago, the one who had left when he chose work over their relationship. She's in town for business, Alexander explained, looking both nervous and hopeful. She called out of the blue. Apparently, she's heard about the work we're doing with affordable housing and wanted to congratulate me. She said she never thought I'd find my way back to caring about people instead of just profits. Are you going to see her? Marcus asked. I'd like to, Alexander admitted. But I was wondering, would you and Emma maybe want to come along? I know it's a strange request, but you two have taught me so much about what really matters. If there's any chance of reconnecting with Sarah, I want her to meet the people who helped me remember who I used to be. Emma looked up from the coloring book she had pulled out of her backpack. Is Sarah nice? Will she like us? Alexander knelt, down to Emma's level, something that had become natural for him over the months. I think she'll love you, Emma, and if she doesn't, then she's not as smart as I remember. 3 days later, they met Sarah at the same small cafe where Marcus and Alexander had first had coffee together. Marcus was nervous about intruding on such a personal reunion, but Alexander had insisted he wanted them there. Sarah turned out to be a warm, intelligent woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and an easy laugh. She was a social worker who had spent the past 20 years helping families in crisis, and she was immediately charmed by Emma and impressed by the work Marcus and Alexander were doing together. You know, Sarah said to Alexander as they prepared to leave, this is the man I fell in love with 20 years ago. I'm glad you found your way back to him. As they walked to their cars, Emma skipping ahead of them, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't know exactly what happened between you two, but Alex is completely different from the man I used to know. He talks about you and Emma like you saved his life. Marcus looked ahead at Alexander, who was helping Emma tie her shoe on a nearby bench, his expensive suit completely forgotten as he focused on this simple task. I think maybe we saved each other, he said. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the backyard of the new house he and Emma had moved into, a modest 3-bedroom home in a safe neighborhood with good schools and a yard big enough for the golden retriever puppy that Alexander had surprised Emma with for her 6th birthday. Alexander was there too, along with Sarah, who had decided to relocate to the city to give their relationship another chance. As Marcus watched Emma play with her new puppy while Alexander and Sarah sat on the porch swing talking quietly, he thought about that day in the office building restroom, when a simple act of kindness from a stranger had started this entire journey. Sometimes the most important moments in life looked like nothing special when they happened. Just two people being decent to each other when they didn't have to be. Emma ran over with the puppy in her arms, both of them covered in grass stains, and completely happy. Daddy, Uncle Alex says maybe next year we can all go on vacation together to the beach. Can we? Marcus looked at Alexander, who nodded with a smile. I think that sounds perfect, Princess. As the sun set over their backyard, Marcus realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and full of love and possibility. All because of a chance encounter in a bathroom, and two lonely people who had been brave enough to let each other in. Sometimes the best families were the ones you chose, and sometimes the most important meetings happened in the most ordinary places. Marcus had learned that love came in many forms, and that second chances were possible for anyone willing to take them. Their story had started with a simple kindness between strangers, but it had become something much more beautiful, a testament to the power of human connection and the possibility of finding family in the most unexpected places.